Thank you. Thank you for having me. Great to see you all in person, and if you're online, thanks for taking the time. Very ambitious session title, The Future of Data. This is going to be interesting, right? I'm sure you're probably asking yourself a lot of questions. So I'm going to give you a few ways to interact, of course. I want to get your questions. That's really how we're going to make sure that this session has the most value for you. So I'm going to go through a few slides. My intent is not to go through all the slides, but it just gives you some perspective on what is the problem that we're focused on solving at Google Cloud, what we're hearing from customers, and how this relates to you in the audience. If after this there's anything you don't agree with, anything you have more questions about, my last name reads forward and backwards the same way. Very easy to get a hold of me. My email address is brunoaziza@google.com. And if you Google me, I think I'm probably the only one that has that combination of names. Does anybody in the room have a last name or first name that reads the same way? No, I'm the only one in the room. No, I thought it was you. Anybody called Bob? No? So that's called a palindrome. So there you go. And I am French, so if you hear a little bit of an accent, that's what's going on, which also makes it easy for our interruptions. If while we do questions, again, you don't agree with anything I'm saying, that's fine. You're not offending me. You can always interrupt me. All right, so we're here to talk about what is the opportunity for our customers, and you've heard a lot about it today, right? The reason for why we're in the room is, of course, because huge opportunity with data and AI. And in fact, if you look at the latest survey, you'll find that big data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning are absolutely the things that CIOs want to operationalize. The key word here is operationalize. A lot of activity, a lot of excitement, but what we see with the organizations that we work with is this challenge on making this a reality for our organization. And so if you look at the status of where organizations are today, 90% of organizations are still struggling to connect their excitement, their tool set, the skill set of their team into actual business outcome. In fact, one of the biggest issues that we see is reflected in career length of chief data officers. How many of you here in the room have a chief data officer today at your organization? Do you know how long the tenure of a chief data officer is today in the enterprise today worldwide? 1,000 days. 2 years, somebody said 2 years, which, okay, so it's harder. Maybe you've lived through a few iterations of chief data officer. But that's where we can help them. The way we can help them is start from the business outcome back and help them realize this operational machine learning and AI coming together. Now, of course, when we go into, now how do you take a look at what's happening today? Well, there's obviously a lot of reasons for why it's difficult to work and operationalize the work of data. What are these issues? Well, the first one is, we know this, data is big, but also data is multi-format. And our industry is really focused a lot on really working with structured data. We're here at this conference because we like other things than structured data, but that's not the reality for a lot of data warehousing scenarios today. And so being able to have a system, a platform, an approach that allows you to essentially take any data however it comes in is a top priority for organizations to work with. We also noticed that while SQL is a big place for a lot of the community that we work with, primarily business analysts, there's a lot more than that. There's working obviously in different workloads, Spark being one of them, but also working through API. So the modernization of our stack is requiring that we think beyond SQL. And then finally, if we've learned anything from the last 30 years of investing in this space, is that data to be effective needs to effectively reach everyone, not just us, the data people, not just the data engineers, not just the data scientists, not just the business analysts, but also the people in the business, the line of business folks that actually need to make decisions. So where we see the industry is going is a lot of decision-making can be operationalized, automated, to a point where you could get to an opt-out way, where maybe a system can tell you, in light of these scenarios, here is the decision that most likely needs to be activated next. Would you like to make that happen? Imagine if we had a world like that. In our daily life, I don't know about you, but I have 2 kids, and I go to the store just about every other day to buy the same thing, eggs and milk. For some reason, nobody's built something that just ships me that thing. I guess Amazon probably has. But it's not arriving. And so think about the context of the business decisions we make at our own company today that could really be telling us, hey, noticing the patterns here, this needs to happen next. Would you like it to happen or not? But we're very far from that, right? 68% of organizations today are able to connect this idea with the work that they're doing. The other trends that are getting in the way, there's good news and bad news here, is that while we lived in a world that had primarily data on-prem, we're now increasingly going to a world where everything's going to be in the cloud. I think according to Gartner, 75% of data warehousing workloads will be in the cloud by them this year, if you believe that or not. So 30 years of on-prem data warehousing and data lake work. We went through a dupe, and a lot of that was on-prem. 75% by the end of this year is going to be in the cloud. So if cloud is not something you're thinking through, at least the analyst firms think that everybody's going to get there. But beyond just the cloud, it's actually never one cloud. It's most likely going to be multiple clouds. And the reason for why that matters is that because even if your organization, say, has made a bet on one particular cloud, and we hope, of course, that it is the Google Cloud, but if it's in any of the other clouds, you know that you're going to interact with these other workloads over there, primarily because, one, you might partner with companies that have data in a different cloud. And we know that the work of data requires ecosystem thinking. So if I need to share data with you, or if I need to create a solution through a data exchange with you, if you're my supplier and I'm a retailer, most likely you're going to have data in some other cloud. You're probably going to partner with other folks that have data in another cloud. Or your organization might acquire new companies that have their data in cloud. And then the third reason probably would be all clouds are not born equal. Some clouds are great at infrastructure and really driving costs down for storing cold data. But then other clouds might be really great at running analytics at a high level, machine learning, and so forth. So you're going to want to pick which is the best cloud for you to do the work. The second trend that we see where really is creating issues for organizations is we've told them never throw away data. Store data. Don't worry about it. Give everyone access to it. And what we're realizing is that if you do that without cataloging, without having a data fabric solution, having really intelligent governance capabilities, you get into a lot of trouble. So we see a lot of organizations, they don't really start with intelligent data fabrics as a principle, and then they got to work back into it. I know it's not sexy to talk about governance, and that's probably the struggle of many chief data officers today, where their first agenda might be data catalog and data cleaning and lineage and all of that. But at Google, what we've been working on that's been really successful over the last year, we made this product available in GA at the beginning of the year in February called Dataplex. It's an intelligent data fabric, and what we see is people adopting that because the secret sauce of that product is that it's going to go out, use artificial intelligence, and identify where your data is, create landing zones for you, and allow you to apply central policies to distributed data. So this idea of governance is a big one. The other three here, I'll just quickly mention them because real-time analytics, is something that not a lot of organizations were worried about maybe a few years ago, but certainly from our perspective, and we work with digital natives, but also work with very traditional organizations. The last 2 years have really been challenging for organizations that did not have real-time insights. So if you're a retailer, if you're a financial organization, the one advantage you had was location, location, location. You had access in real time to the people coming to your business. Now you don't, so you need to orchestrate for, of course, digitalization, but ability to understand the experiences in real time and modify them as you go. And so real time with product like Dataflow for us is an important workload. Price performance, I'm going to pass that, but I want to talk a few seconds about data mesh. Super hot topic. Anyone heard about data mesh? Let's see. Who has not heard about data mesh at this point? I think Zamak is presenting at this conference. So the concept of data mesh is this idea of having innovation at the edge. There's lots of principles. I think there's 6 principles and so forth. But the ability to maintain governance of financial ops actually is not part of the data mesh model, but it is something that's really important for organizations when they have distribution and innovation. What we see organizations get to is often data mesh is not the final destination of their plan. Data mesh is a step to get to what we all want to do, which is build data products. I think everyone in this room here the opportunity we have to help our boss and our chief data officer or organizations is to take the data we have and make them become data products. That's how you know you're a data-driven organization, because you've built a product where now it might be an internal product, an external product, but the reason for why we think about products is because when the product doesn't work, you lose money. And so the typical maturity where we see organizations go through is data ocean is the first stage, where they get their data across multiple clouds. They're called multiple workloads, operational, transactional, analytical. Then they get to a data mesh, which is really an organizational construct, to then build a data product, which might feel like a business solution, anomaly detection, fraud analytics, and so forth. Does that make sense? Let me stop here. So far, we're tracking. People online, I know you can't answer, but just text me or get me on Twitter if you have any questions or you don't agree. The room is absolutely with me here. If you're not seeing them, there's a bus outside. They can't come in. All right. So now, let's see here. It's not clicking, so I'm just going to click manually. What is our perspective here at Google, and how do we think about this idea of enabling the concept of data mesh, data products for all organizations, small, medium, large, digital native, traditional organizations? If you remember the three issues I talked about, right, this idea of you got to be able to work with data irrespective of its form, irrespective of its size, right? The issue that we run into on a daily basis is that the unpredictable nature of the data type and the data size, the speed at which it's coming in. So we have this concept of limitless data. I'll talk to you about it in a minute. Limitless workloads. Increasingly, organizations want to work in an ecosystem where it's fluid, to move from one workload to the next. It might be a data analyst, and if we have time, I'll also be able to show you a little bit of what that feels like. But the idea to go from a simple data experience to a dashboard to maybe a SQL console to maybe a machine learning pipeline. And then finally, limitless reach. We bought an organization called Looker a few years ago. Anybody heard of Looker before? A few people have. The idea of Looker, lots of people thought about it as a business intelligence tool. In fact, it is a framework for building data applications. So if you're a data engineer in the room and you haven't looked at Looker, you should write this down. Check out LookML. LookML is a framework that allows you to build these data-rich experiences. It's SQL-based. And that's the reason for why we really wanted to invest in it, is because we think that building dashboards is a type of application. Increasingly, organizations are building data products, and we want to provide them with the stack to enable them to do that. All right, a few examples. So why limitless scale? So this is an organization that had originally invested in a different cloud before us. And remember this concept of multi-cloud? So often what we walk into is an organization that's gone through a legacy cloud, we will call them in this case, or a cloud that really is organized towards enabling this data ocean, lower cost, better managed services, but is not helping that organization to actually innovate with data analytics capabilities. And so what did innovation look like? Well, obviously, a lot of data, but also a lot of speed. When you're working in real-time business, the ability to analyze 11 terabytes per second is fairly unique. If you've not taken a look at their journey, I would suggest that you go to google.com's blog. We document specifically how the organization got there, and we also document their process for selecting the right cloud for what right workload, right? Because they're still living in a multi-cloud environment, and many of our organizations, our customers do that. The second concept, if I can click, there you go, this idea of open to all workloads. So the reason for why I love the example of HSBC is because often people think about Google as an organization where we work with people that have data engineers, as many as we do, and are digital natives. And it's not entirely true. We work with organizations across the board, and HSBC is a very old bank. It's probably one of the first banks out there. They moved 32 years worth of data into our cloud in order to run fraud analytics, streaming analytics, the ability to identify issues faster. 70 million models built on BigQuery. If you haven't picked up on this yet, I'm a big fan of BigQuery. It's one of the many products that we offer. But it should be your entry point into our data analytics ecosystem. So if you're not familiar with LookML and BigQuery, those would be the first two products that go take a look at, because that's how people build their first workloads on our platform. HSBC has a great video as well to take a look at if you want to find out more about them. And then finally, here's an organization that has a lot of data engineers. In fact, 18% of Wayfair's employees are data people. Anybody know how many data people the average organization has as a percentage of total employees? Just yell out an answer. You think it's 18% on average? 3% here. Let's see. Less than 1. 5%. Yeah, it's in 6%. So this organization has 3 times the number of data engineers inside. What are they worried about? They're worried about making sure that the work of their data engineers actually gets to everybody. Right? So they're hyper-focused on, even though a large portion of our folks are data engineers, we want to make sure that regular people whose job is not to be a data person actually get access to this data and reduce this time where they highly rely on engineering teams in the past, technology teams in the past. We talked a lot about Big Lake at our last event. If you are not familiar with our event series, here's what's going on with our business in general. About 2 years ago, the only way you would learn from us is essentially if you went to Google Next. I mean, in general, you have other ways, of course, going to a website, talking to your sales team, and so forth. But I mean at scale. And so what we heard from the community is that, talk to me more about the innovation you're releasing. And so we launched a summit called the Data Cloud Summit, which happens typically in the first quarter or maybe at the beginning of the second quarter, one calendar year. And so it's a free event. And if you have not attended it, now it's becoming a yearly thing. So register for that so you can be part of it. We also are now adding a data engineering summit. This actually, the marketing team might be upset that I'm doing that, especially online, because they have not announced this. But at the end of July, if you're a data engineer, Data Engineering Summit is going to give you a level below what the Data Summit gave you on 200 level, 300 level type of content on what does it mean to work with Data Lake? What does it mean to work with Big Lake? What does it mean to work with BigQuery? But it's the idea of how do we take advantage of an ecosystem like ours to embrace, obviously, open source, which is something we're very well known for, but also embrace the current workloads that you're working on and support you with one platform to enable all of them. BigQuery Omni is a big component of that. I talked about multi-cloud earlier. Our observation has been that the approach to multi-cloud today is actually to create multiple silos across clouds. Right? Today, most vendors will say, yeah, I'm multi-cloud. What does that mean for them? Is I have an instance of workload A in this cloud, an instance of workload B in that cloud, an instance of workload C in that cloud. Maybe it's even the same workloads, but essentially more silos in the cloud. Our design principle was, can we create a unified experience that actually sends the compute to the data rather than force you to deploy in each cloud? And that's what BigQuery Omni is. So BigQuery Omni is one single pane of glass that allows you to write your SQL and send that to where the data is at. It is a product that's GA today. It works on Amazon, it works on Azure, it works on GCP. And so it's a big component of how we open to the rest of the ecosystem. If you think about it, I think we're probably the only vendor that has this approach of saying, we know you have data in somebody else's cloud, or you're going to have to, and we want to embrace that rather than force you to move it all into our cloud before you can start innovating. So it's a big design principle. I'd suggest that you take a look at it if you're not familiar with it. So at this point, I've talked about 3 key areas that could be great follow-ups: Looker, BigQuery, BigQuery Omni in particular, and then all this gets wrapped up into Big Lake. Bless you. Spark, important workload. Obviously, many of you are here because of Spark. That's how this industry, the company was really based on. And so if you see how we've been able to invest in Spark, you'll see really Spark is a first-class citizen on the GCP platform today. And there are many ways to interact with Spark on our platform. What I will say is that the place where we're super focused on is how do we make it easy for you to just work with Spark? Like today, what we found is 60% of your time is about setting up the infrastructure, worrying about everything that is actually not the thing you want to do. You only spend 40% of your time on that. And so what we're focused on is, first of all, we don't want you to think about infrastructure. You can onboard a Spark workload without doing much, actually, on GCP. And then secondly, we want you to have the most flexibility for paying for that. So most organizations might charge you at VM level. We charge you at the job level, which makes it really compelling for Spark developers to do more work because you know you're not going to be overpaying for stuff that you're not going to be doing. And so I know there's a lot of information on this slide. My understanding is you'll get access to the slides. If not, you just Google Spark and GCP, and then you'll get probably to a similar slide. But I wanted to at least kind of tell you what's going on in our mind and what it is that we're trying to solve for. And then this slide, this couldn't be simpler, right? Look at all these boxes. So I'm going to just try and simplify that for you. Reach. So we talked so far about limitless data, limitless workload, reach. What do we mean by reach? Most of the data that we work on ends up in the hands of people that need to have this data, and historically we thought about them as data analysts. How many of us think that the future of consumption of analytics is going to be the data analysts? Not many, actually. The only person raising their hand taking photo. So what is, if you now project yourself into 5 years from now, the consumer of analytics, the consumer of insights, is very similar to the person that's going to google.com. No training. They can just talk, or they can just write, and they get hyper-personalized insights at a massive scale, right? Google.com has billions of users. Same thing for YouTube. Same thing for many of our products. But the idea of this slide is to say, look, if you've thought about Google as the company that understands data engineers, that's true. But we've also been in the business of what we think is a consumer of insights of the future for 30 years. And by the way, that has been the core of our business. And so we've devised infrastructure and solutions that we're now making available to you that will essentially never fail, because some of the products that are behind this infrastructure are the most reliable products on the market, right? So BigQuery is about 10 times more reliable than anybody in the cloud data warehousing space. Spanner, which is the system that runs Gmail. I'm sure many of you use Gmail. It's the only database that has 5.9 in the market. So we think about data. The work that you do, we think about it as a business-critical workload, which historically has not been the case, right? One of the issues for why we didn't get budget and we didn't get teams before is because a lot of the work that we do is like, do your thing and show me how that connects to, business value, the ROI of data. We don't think that way. We think that in 10 years from now, it'll be the same thing as asking, why do you have a finance department inside your organization? The stuff we do is actually business critical or core to the organization. And so that's why we're focused on, from the developer all the way to the consumer of insights. Did the light go down, or is it just me? We're getting into the yoga part of this session. Everybody has a mat under your chair. I'm feeling very relaxed. All right, so I'm going to try and stay on schedule, even though now it's just cooling down. Is there music coming up, or? All right. I talked about a lot of our capabilities and our approach and why we do what we do. A big part that's important about our approach to the market is how we embrace the ecosystem. So obviously, we're here because we're a huge partner. There you go. Light is back on. Because we're a huge partner of Databricks. We work with Databricks a lot. It's not the only partner that's part of our ecosystem, right? So we have launched this Data Cloud Alliance, which is really embracing the vendors that are part of your ecosystem. The idea here is that instead of making you use my tool set, what I want to do is devise a system that embraces your tool set. So some of you might use Fivetran, some of you might use Informatica, or both. They are part of the Data Cloud Alliance. And again, if you're not familiar with that, or if you have vendors that you want to suggest should be part of this, let us know. You have my email address, but you can also go to the site and submit your vendors. We think we have pretty good visibility on the vendors that should be part of this, but we also are curious to make sure we're enabling you, Starburst being one of the newest ones as well. We have 7 minutes left. We can do two things. We could take questions, or we could see a quick demo. So we're just going to vote. Who wants to go for questions? This is a really interactive session. Oh my gosh. I've answered all the questions. Who wants to go for demo? Maybe everybody wants to leave. OK, everybody wants to go demo. All right, cool. So what I'm going to show you here is a quick example of the end results that most organizations want to get to. And so I talked about this idea of the limitless cloud. In my scenario here, just pretend with me, and can you see it all? Yeah, you can see the whole screen. Here, you don't see it well. It's 11:13, so I effectively have 6 minutes. I'm an operations manager at this company called Robotaxi. Now, many of us here are in San Francisco. In San Francisco, you now can get access to self-driving taxis, autonomous vehicles. And so this company does that. This company has these robotaxis that they're managing in real time. Now, lots of great insights right off the bat. I've got 208 cars that are driving right now out of 491. You can see it here. 260 cars are available for my customers. And as I go through here, each type of car, you can see here on the bottom left, the actual stats of my driver. See, Clifford just showed up here. He's on the $4 estimated revenue. Bobby is coming next. So I can see here real-time insight that's coming from my autonomous vehicle, my IoT data, as well as my transactional system. A big part of this company, Robotaxi, is that, why did we start it? Because we wanted to drive an intelligent business, but we also wanted to be able to understand in real time, how much are we saving? And so here we're seeing that we're saving 25,000 gallons of gas. That's at a real-time price, I think, for this particular state of $5.95 per gallon. Now, of course, I can work with that. It's never going to happen, but in case the gallon goes to $10, I can also see what that translates into, but we're not going to worry about that. But the point here, the example here that I'm showing you is that I have obviously internal data coming in through my vehicles in real time, transactional systems that tell me about my revenue. This gas price is actually going in through an API. So this is a great example of a data product. What do data products do? They don't care about where the data is at. They're bringing into a point of decision so I can answer a question myself. We also, in my company, we rely a lot about, obviously, where we've been from a revenue standpoint, but we also care a lot about our forecast. And so I'll show you in a minute how did this forecast get built using capabilities called BigQuery machine learning. We're the only cloud data warehousing that has embedded machine learning. So a data analyst that knows SQL can trigger a machine learning model and then build it. And so this is a result of my forecasting model. And the platform is built through intelligence. So what we realize is that there's a lot of intelligence coming into our experiences. And this is something for you to consider is that, remember earlier when I was telling you about decision making and the velocity for decision making, I never want to be putting an operations manager in a position where they actually have to take a conclusion. I want to give them a suggestion. So in this case, it's showing me that I've brought Eventbrite data into BigQuery here. So I've brought essentially event data. So I know that the Databricks conference is coming in. This is 2 weeks ago. There's going to be a lot of traffic. I have all these robotaxis that right at that time, they're due for maintenance. And what the machine's telling me is that, in fact, if you send them to maintenance right now, you're going to save $52,000. So that's a great example of where the model is actually coming in and saying, here, you can enable that. What I just did pressing this button is sending now into my transactional database in order to ship these robotaxis to maintenance. So it's a great example of integration across an analytical and transactional workload. This other example here shows you how the system is thinking about creating opportunities for the model, for the business model in particular. When we have robotaxis that are picking up the same 2 different people in the same block and dropping them off right around the same area, why send them 2 robotaxis? Very inefficient. So the model's figured out, you know what, right now you got 27 split fare options. What does that mean is that instead of sending 2 robotaxis, I'm going to send 1, and I'm going to offer a 30% discount to both of these folks. So they're paying less, and I'm sending just 1 taxi. So now I've got more availability. I can model this if I want to, but the idea here is I can go in and just dispatch the 1 robotaxi instead of 2. So here what we've seen is this idea of limitless data, limitless workload, working across transactional analytical, and peppering in intelligence into the workload itself. In the next 2 minutes, what I want to show you is that what does that translate to now if I'm a business analyst? I want to kind of double click under that. Well, there's 2 areas that we're really focused on at our company. The first one is our executives always asked us, how do I know which car fleet or which type of car is best for my business. And often we have a litany of metrics we can go on. So what we did is we built this composite index, which now shows me, and this is completely random, right, that the Waymo robotaxis are the best across all of them. I don't know how this happened. This is a demo. But the point here is the idea of my model has brought now data coming across multiple systems, including my customer satisfaction survey that tells me that there's a high level of satisfaction on these rides. Again, exemplifying this idea of data coming from everywhere. And then on the left side here, we've started to identify now opportunities for growth. There's 2 airports we're serving here. If you noticed on Google Maps earlier, it was LaGuardia and JFK, and there's Newark Airport as well. And we're seeing the LaGuardia rides are doing well, but the JFK ones are not. And so this is a job for a business analyst that's going to go in here and say, what's happening here for JFK? What could we do here that's going to affect the 21 million passengers that we're transporting this year? Now, this is not going to be the case for an operations manager who's going to want to go into a dashboard experience, but what I'm showing you here, this is a Looker dashboard. This is the entire solution I just showed you here is built on the back of LookML. That's why I mentioned it earlier, is this idea of building really rich intelligence data applications. So everybody's familiar with dashboards at this point, so I'm not going to go through how I added a field here, but you can see the experience is bringing me now passengers. How many passengers would I affect? 260,000 if I change the price for JFK as an example. Now, this is great for an operations manager. It's great for a data analyst. But what if I was a data scientist? Or what if I was someone who wants now to project into my model what would happen to those rights? So let's say next, I'm out of time, but I will just give me 30 seconds if you don't mind, because this is an important part of the demo. What you're looking at here, many of you will love this, is BigQuery. BigQuery, we have this idea of saved queries, the ability to move across multiple workloads. What you're seeing here is that my business analyst, just using SQL, is actually running a shared SQL from another business analyst that is now predicting how many rides I'm going to have, which then allows me to model beyond that. If I wanted to export this to anything else, let's say Vertex AI, which is our workbench, you see how I just searched here? So the idea here is we want to make things accessible to you just about we do it anywhere else. So if I had New York data about rides, bike trips, I can also do that right from the interface here. So the idea here is how can we bring all this world together for you across limitless data, workloads, and reach. I'm out of time, but I will be here for questions people want to come up here. I hope this was useful and instructive. Don't forget to go to our booth. It's 5:15, right, the booth? Correct. And then email me if you have any questions. Thank you for your time.